wise man once said, "You will believe anything you repeat," and that should scare you more than anything else. Because what he meant was this: it doesn't matter whether it's true. It doesn't matter whether it's useful. It doesn't even matter where it came from. If you say it enough times, if you think it enough times, if you feel it enough times, your mind will believe it. That's not a metaphor. That's how the human mind works. Your subconscious is not your judge. It doesn't evaluate. It doesn't verify. It doesn't debate. It listens, and it records. Every word you whisper in frustration, every excuse you repeat in the dark, every belief you chant out of habit, your subconscious accepts all of it. Not because it's accurate, but because it's familiar. And this is where it begins. Right now, without even knowing it, you are programming your life. Every time you say, "I'm not good enough," every time you think, "That's just who I am," every time you hear that voice saying, "You'll never make it," and you don't argue, you agree. You install it. You feed it into the operating system of your identity, and slowly, invisibly, that suggestion becomes your story. That story becomes your emotion. That emotion becomes your behavior. And eventually, that behavior becomes your truth. But it was never true. It was just repeated. That's why I'm telling you now, faith isn't magic. It isn't inherited. It's built. Just like fear is built. Just like doubt is built. Just like every excuse you've repeated until it felt real. And if you can build fear, you can build faith. Word by word, thought by thought, repetition by repetition, until the voice inside becomes your ally instead of your enemy. Until what you say is what you believe. So know your life is not a reflection of facts. It's a reflection of frequency. Whatever you repeat, you become. Belief is not sacred. It's not divine. It's programmable. And that should change everything for you. Because most people walk through life thinking belief is something they have or don't have. That it's inherited through culture, passed down through blood bestowed by experience. But it's not. It's code. Lines and lines of internal instructions. Written by your words, shaped by your thoughts, sculpted by your emotions. Every time you whisper, "I can't," you're adding a line of code. Every time you think, "That's not for someone like me," you're reinforcing it. Every time you surrender to that internal voice that says, "You're not ready," you are programming a future that aligns with that fear. And here's the part most never understand. That program becomes identity. It becomes the filter through which you see yourself. It becomes the weight behind every decision, every hesitation, every withdrawal from opportunity. You think it's who you are, but it's who you've repeated. You think it's reality, but it's just reinforced suggestion. When belief is left on autopilot, it mimics whatever it hears most. And most people hear doubt. They hear limits. They hear the story of not enough so often it no longer sounds like a lie. It just sounds like them. But it's not you. It's the echo of repetition. And here's the dangerous part. Once that echo becomes identity, you don't even need evidence anymore. You'll believe it without proof. Because identity doesn't seek truth. It seeks consistency. It wants to match what you've told it over and over again. That's why most people stay stuck. Not because they're incapable, but because they've convinced themselves they are word by word, thought by thought, day by day. Belief is programmable, and if you're not writing the code with intention, then you're running a script someone else left behind. You're not living your life, you're living your programming. And the only way to change that is to become the programmer. They'll tell you it's just your personality, that you're simply not confident, that you're naturally shy, that you're being realistic. But what if that's not the truth? What if what you call who I am is really just the residue of repetition? Most people don't believe in themselves not because they're weak, but because they've rehearsed weakness for so long that it no longer feels like a performance. It feels like identity. They've repeated the same self-limiting stories until those stories became their self-definition. I'm not the type. I could never do that. I've always struggled. And the more they say it, the more their mind wraps around it until the narrative becomes law. But it's not a law. It's just a suggestion accepted too many times. Let me make this clear: your mind is loyal, not to your potential, but to your programming. And if that programming was built on fear, doubt, or secondhand insecurity, it will lead your life in circles until you interrupt the loop. Because what you call being realistic might just be someone else's failure echoing through your inner world, unquestioned and unchallenged. Personality is not fixed. It's fluid. And much of it is formed by what you've repeatedly told yourself you are. So the next time you say, "That's just who I am," pause. Ask yourself, who told me that? Where did that belief begin? Was it a decision I made or a suggestion I absorbed? Because if it came from someone else's fear, from someone else's limitation, from someone else's version of me, then it's not who I am. It's who I was taught to be. And if you were taught it, you can untie it. You can unlearn it. You can undo the script. You can write a new one. No, you're not stuck. You're just running old code. But now, you see the screen. You see the commands. And with every new line you write, you reclaim who you were meant to be. Your mind doesn't care if a suggestion helps you or harms you. It only cares whether it's repeated. That's the law of auto-suggestion. And whether you realize it or not, it's running every moment of your life. Every thought you think, every word you say, every belief you reinforce, it's all being submitted to the subconscious like a command line. And the subconscious, it doesn't push back. It doesn't argue. It doesn't say, "Wait, is that helpful?" It simply receives. Which means this: if you don't choose your programming, someone else will. Your environment, your past, your fears. The people who didn't believe in themselves, they'll all volunteer to write the code for you. Not out of malice, out of habit, out of their own unexamined pain. And if you're not aware, you'll mistake their limitations as your truth. You'll inherit beliefs you never asked for. You'll carry doubts that were never yours. You'll repeat phrases passed down from generation to generation. "I'm not cut out for that. People like us don't get ahead. It's too risky. Be realistic." And every time you let those words echo, you reinforce them. Not because they're accurate, but because they're familiar. And familiarity is the only requirement your subconscious needs. It doesn't care whether it's right, only whether it's repeated. That's why fear, once a whisper, can become a fortress. That's why doubt, once a flicker, can become your default lens. That's why people live entire lives under the weight of beliefs they never questioned. So let me ask you, who's writing the code? Is it you? Or is it a leftover voice from your childhood? A teacher who didn't believe, a parent who never healed, a culture addicted to average. This is not a game. This is your life. And the longer you let someone else's suggestion repeat inside your head, the more it becomes yours. But the moment you see it, you can stop it. You can rewrite the line. You can speak the new command. And most importantly, you can reclaim the pen, because your subconscious is always listening, and it's ready for new instructions. You can change the program, not by begging, not by waiting, but by deliberately feeding your mind a new truth, until that truth speaks louder than the lie. You don't defeat a false belief by arguing with it. You defeat it by replacing it. And replacement doesn't come through logic alone. It comes through repetition. Repetition with emotion. Because your subconscious doesn't respond to facts. It responds to feeling. It responds to vibration. It listens to tone, to energy, to conviction. That's why people can repeat a lie and still believe it even when they know better. Because the lie came wrapped in certainty, in emotion, in consistency. And your subconscious, it confused consistency for truth. But that same system can work in your favor. Say the new truth. Say it again. Say it like you mean it. Say it when it's hard. Say it when it feels foreign. Say it until your nervous system begins to resonate with it. Because once the mind hears something often enough with enough emotional charge, it begins to believe. Not out of logic, but out of familiarity. That's not wishful thinking. That's neurology. It's how your fears were built, and it's how your faith can be installed. No, you don't need to wait for a breakthrough. You don't need to wait to feel ready. You need to feed the right message with ruthless discipline until it becomes the new signal your subconscious runs on. Because repetition is not weakness, it's power. It's precision. It's construction. Brick by brick, word by word. You build a foundation so strong the old beliefs don't just fall apart, they become irrelevant. You don't need to argue with the lie. You need to make the truth louder. And repetition is how volume is built. This is faith, installed, not inherited. See, most people think faith is some divine lottery, something you either have or you don't. But that's not how it works. Faith is not reserved for the chosen few. It's not sprinkled from the sky. It's not a mystical flame that randomly catches fire. Faith is installed. It's a system, a process, a pattern you follow until the belief becomes reality, and the most powerful force shaping your life. It's not your talent, not your degrees, not your environment. It's the programming of your subconscious mind. And here's the secret most never hear. Your subconscious doesn't care if it's true. It only cares if it's repeated. It doesn't test for logic. It doesn't validate sources. It doesn't ask for credentials. It simply asks, have I heard this enough times to accept it? It's not a critic. It's a receiver. The moment an idea is delivered with enough frequency and emotion, it becomes law in your inner world. Not because it's right, but because it's familiar. That's why people live trapped in false identities. Not because the identity was accurate, but because it was repeated. That's why a whisper like "you're not enough" can evolve into a lifelong wall of prison disguised as personality. Your subconscious mind is fertile soil. It will grow anything. It doesn't ask whether the seed will nourish you or poison you. It just asks, is this what you keep planting? And every time you think the same thought, especially with emotion, you're planting it deeper. Every time you say the same thing about yourself, you're watering it. The more you repeat it, the deeper the roots grow, and eventually it becomes your identity. And here's the punchline. Once something becomes your identity, you no longer seek facts to confirm it. You just keep repeating it. Because belief doesn't need evidence to survive. It just needs habit. That's why most people never change. They never interrupt the suggestions that shaped them. They never questioned the voice in their head that said, people like you don't succeed. It's too late. You don't deserve more. They accepted that voice, and now it's driving them. But now that you know how it works, you can install a new voice, a stronger one, a chosen one. Because faith is not a mystery, it's a mechanism. And you now have the blueprint. Repetition becomes identity. And once identity is formed, it becomes the lens through which you experience everything. That's why you can look at opportunity and only see risk. That's why you can be surrounded by potential and still feel stuck. Because the identity you built is filtering reality, and it was built brick by brick with the words you repeated. Every time you said, "I'm not that kind of person," your subconscious recorded it. Every time you whispered, "I'm just not meant for more," it didn't question you. It agreed. And agreement became a groove. A groove became a belief. And that belief became a boundary. But here's the tragedy: most people never trace those beliefs back to their source. They never ask, where did this story begin? Is this really mine? Or did it come from a teacher who stopped dreaming? A parent who never healed? A culture that conditioned safety over growth? They live inside beliefs that were never born from their own experience, but from someone else's failure, repeated until it became familiar. And that's the trap. You can live an entire life inside a system of thoughts that were installed, not discovered. You weren't born with insecurity. You weren't born doubting your worth. You weren't born believing that greatness was for someone else. You were born with nothing but potential. And every limit that followed was downloaded. Through repetition, through language, through emotionally charged moments that stamped a false message into your subconscious. This is who you are. But it wasn't. It was who you were taught to be. And that is the true power of auto-suggestion. It's not just affirmations, it's the entire architecture of who you believe yourself to be, constructed moment by moment, word by word. And if you've unknowingly used that power against yourself, there's no shame in that. Because now, you can consciously use it in your favor. You can speak differently. You can believe differently. You can live differently. But it starts with one decision. To stop reinforcing the old code. To stop calling fear truth. To stop mistaking repetition for reality. Because identity is not your destiny. It's your habit. And habits can be rewritten. This is why people stay the same. Not because they want to, not because they lack the will, but because they've never interrupted the loop. They've never paused long enough to question the voice that's been narrating their life. You're not good enough. People like you don't succeed. It's too late for you. You don't deserve more. They hear these words echo in their mind, and instead of challenging them, they obey. But these weren't truths. They were suggestions. Suggestions repeated enough times to become invisible. Repeated enough times to sound like your own thoughts. And once that happens, the suggestion becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. You act smaller. You take fewer risks. You expect less. And you create the very life that confirms the lie. You shrink your dreams to match your programming. And then you call it fate. But let me tell you something. You weren't born to be average. You weren't born to play small. You weren't born to live someone else's limitations. You were born with infinite capacity, and everything that told you otherwise was programmed into you. The question is, will you keep repeating it, or will you replace it? Because if it was repetition that built your prison, then it is repetition that will build your path to freedom. But freedom doesn't begin with a wish. It begins with a confrontation. You must interrupt the thought, interrupt the story, interrupt the inherited identity, and speak a new one. Not with aggression, not with fear, but with authority. You say, that's not my story anymore. You say, that voice doesn't speak for me. You say, I choose what I believe now. And every time the old narrative returns, you don't run. You rewrite. You redeclare. You reprogram. This is not denial. This is design. Because if you don't consciously rewire your identity, you'll unconsciously recycle your history. And I promise you, you are not here to live on repeat. You are here to upgrade the pattern. Autosuggestion is not some fluffy affirmation ritual. It is strategic spiritual engineering. You are not hoping. You are building. You are not fantasizing. You are installing. You are reconstructing the identity your life will flow from one thought, one emotion, one repetition at a time. And there's a process, a system, one that works not just in theory, but in every human being willing to work it with intention. Step 1. Define exactly what you want to believe. Not a vague hope. Not I want to be better. Not I just want to be happier. Clarity is power. Your mind cannot build what you cannot name. You must give your subconscious a blueprint, a direct instruction that reflects your future, not your fears. I am divinely guided in all I do. I am capable of building a life of purpose and peace. I attract opportunities aligned with my mission. I am free from fear and led by faith. These are not empty phrases. They are commands. They are spiritual code. And when you repeat them daily, you are submitting new instructions to your subconscious. You are saying, this is the version of me I am choosing to install. You're not lying to yourself. You're writing the truth in advance. You are getting ahead of your environment. You are planting identity in the soil of repetition so that your reality can grow from it. And just like a builder lays the foundation before the structure, you must install the belief before you see the evidence. If you wait for proof, you'll never move. But when you define belief clearly, you give your subconscious a destination. And once the destination is clear, your mind begins working toward it. Not because it's magic, because it's how the system was designed. This is how you start. Not by waiting for belief to find you, but by giving it a home to grow in. Clarity is not a luxury. It is the first step in transformation. Step 2. Repeat it out loud with emotion. Words without feeling are just noise. And your subconscious doesn't respond to noise. It responds to vibration. It responds to energy. It responds to the tone of your voice, the intention in your breath, and the conviction in your delivery. This means it's not enough to whisper affirmations like a script. You have to mean them. Even if you don't fully believe them yet, you have to speak them like someone who is becoming them. You stand tall, you breathe deep, and you declare your truth, not for the world to hear, but for your subconscious to receive. Every time you say, "I am capable, I am becoming, I am aligned with purpose," you are carving a groove into your identity. And the deeper that groove gets, the more natural the belief becomes. Because repetition plus emotion equals installation. This is how you rewrite code. Not with logic alone, but with embodied truth. The kind that lives in your tone. The kind that resonates from your chest. The kind that wakes something up inside you even when the evidence hasn't arrived yet. You say it in the morning before the world speaks first. You say it at night when your subconscious is wide open. You say it not because it's proven, but because you're training your nervous system to recognize it as home. That's how a belief is born. It's not forced. It's familiarized. You make it feel normal to say powerful things about yourself. And the more natural it feels to speak that way, the more likely you are to live that way. This is not delusion. This is design. You're not pretending. You're preparing for the day when what you speak becomes what you see. And when that day comes, you won't be surprised, because your subconscious will already be living it. Step 3. Starve the old belief. You cannot build faith while feeding fear. You cannot plant new programming and keep watering the weeds. Every time you repeat an old narrative, even casually, even in jest, you are feeding it. I'm just not good at that. This always happens to me. I've never been the lucky type. Those phrases may sound harmless, but to your subconscious they are commands. You might not mean them, but your subconscious doesn't understand sarcasm. It only understands frequency. It only understands what gets repeated, and what gets repeated gets installed. So, what do? You interrupt it. Not with force, not with shame, but with authority. When the old voice speaks, the one that says, "You're not enough. It's too late. You'll never get there." You don't negotiate. You replace. You say, "That's not my story anymore." You say, "I no longer subscribe to that belief." You say, "This is who I am now," and you speak the new code out loud. You don't argue with the old script. You overwrite it. Just like updating software, you're not fixing old lines, you're installing a new version. And yes, the old voice will try to return. But every time it does, and you respond with your new belief, you weaken the old pathway. You stop feeding it. You let it wither. Because no matter how loud the old narrative once was, it cannot survive without your agreement. It cannot grow without your attention. And every time you choose to speak the new truth, you are withdrawing energy from the old one. You're not just believing in yourself. You're starving the system that kept you small. And the more you starve it, the quieter it gets. Until one day, it's not your voice anymore. It's just static in the background. And your true voice is what rises above it. Step 4. Stay consistent, even when nothing seems to change. This is where most people quit. They do the work for a week. They speak the new truth for a few days, and then nothing feels different. So they stop. They assume it didn't work. They assume the system failed. But the system didn't fail. They just stopped too soon. Because here's what they forget. The old belief didn't appear overnight. It wasn't installed in a single moment. It was reinforced through years of repetition, through experiences that echoed the same message, through voices that repeated the same narrative until it became second nature. So why would you expect a new belief to take hold in one sitting? You're not asking for magic. You're asking for reconstruction. You are overwriting years of subconscious code, and that requires discipline. That requires daily repetition, especially when you don't feel it yet. Because your subconscious doesn't respond to feeling, it responds to consistency. So when nothing feels different, you keep speaking. When doubt creeps in, you repeat louder. When the old identity tries to reclaim its seat, you stay in the process. You keep showing up, not because you're desperate, but because you're decided. You've chosen the new narrative. You've chosen the new identity. And now your actions, your rituals, must reflect that decision. This is not about motivation. This is about momentum. Each repetition is another signal. Each declaration is another brick. And over time, the new path begins to form until belief doesn't just visit you. It lives in you. That's how reality begins to shift. Not from a single lightning bolt of inspiration, but from the fire you light and keep burning with every intentional word you speak. This is the law. What is repeated with emotion becomes belief. What is believed deeply enough becomes identity. And what becomes identity reshapes your entire reality. So don't stop. Not when it gets hard, not when it feels slow, especially not when you're doubting. Because that's when the transformation is closest, and that's when the old system fights the hardest. Stay, speak, repeat, install, until your subconscious no longer questions the new code because it becomes the only code it knows. Faith is not a feeling. It is not a moment of inspiration. It is not a gift granted to the chosen. Faith is a system. And like any system, it can be studied, it can be understood, it can be built. Most people misunderstand faith. They talk about it like it's the weather. They say I'm trying to have more faith. I wish I believed in myself. I just don't feel strong enough right now. But faith has nothing to do with feelings. It's not a wave you ride. It's not luck. It's not reserved for people who have it all together. Faith is built like a house. Constructed like a business, designed like a bridge, and it begins the same way every structure begins, with repetition. Because the mind doesn't build belief from facts alone. It builds belief from frequency. You speak it, you visualize it, you reinforce it, and you do it before you see the evidence. Not because you're pretending, but because you're planting. You are laying bricks every time you say, I am worthy, I am strong, I am becoming. And the more bricks you lay, the stronger the foundation becomes. Then comes the next layer, emotion. Words alone are not enough. You have to feel them. You have to say them with breath, with energy, with a sense of becoming. That's what your subconscious responds to. That's what creates resonance. That's what creates momentum. And then, decision. Faith is activated by choice, not by mood. You don't wait until you feel confident. You act from the belief that you're becoming confident. Each action is an agreement with the new identity, and the more you act in alignment with who you want to be, the faster that identity locks in. Faith grows by usage, like a muscle. It strengthens under weight. So you don't say, I'll move when I'm sure. You say, I'm moving because this is who I'm becoming. And your movement becomes the proof. The world follows those who lead themselves. And faith is how you lead your inner world. It's not theory. It's not magic. It's a repeatable system. And if you work it, it works. Faith does not survive in chaos. It must be protected. You cannot install new beliefs while standing in the middle of noise, doubt, and distraction. Every environment carries energy. Every voice you allow in is another suggestion being broadcast to your subconscious. So if you're serious about reprogramming your identity, you must guard the gate. Not out of fear, out of intention. This doesn't mean you isolate yourself. It means you become selective. You decide. What conversations feed your belief? Which voices reinforce your vision? Which habits align with who you're becoming? Because if your environment is filled with fear, limitation, and passivity, then no matter how disciplined you are in the morning, your surroundings will erase your programming by night. Every complaint you tolerate, every cynical joke you laugh at, every interaction that echoes the old code is an opportunity for the subconscious to revert. So you eliminate what weakens the new identity. You detox the doubt. You distance yourself from voices that romanticize mediocrity. You don't judge them, but you no longer join them. Because when you're building a new belief system, your mind is vulnerable. And until that system stabilizes, you must protect it like sacred ground. You build rituals around it. You create space for silence. You surround yourself with energy that reflects your new story. This is not about control. It's about alignment. You cannot expect to believe in yourself while surrounding yourself with those who constantly speak in fear. You cannot install worth while dancing in environments that broadcast insecurity. So you draw the line. Not to push people out, but to keep your power in. Because one voice of belief spoken consistently in a safe environment can transform a life. But that same voice drowned out by chaos and contradiction will struggle to take root. This is your sacred space, and if you don't protect it, no one else will. Faith must be practiced. Not once, not occasionally, but daily. Because faith isn't a mountain you climb and conquer. It's a path you walk again and again. And every step you take reinforces the system you've chosen to believe in. You speak the truth even when fear is loud. You hold the vision even when the evidence is missing. You repeat the program morning, night, and in between. Because faith isn't built in the peak moments. It's built in the mundane, in the repetition, in the ritual, in the commitment to speak power over your life when no one is watching, and when everything around you suggests otherwise. This is what most people miss. They wait for inspiration to act. But true faith is forged in the fire of discipline. You show up to the mirror, you speak the identity, you visualize the outcome, and you do it again before it looks like it's working, before it feels real. Because here's the truth. You're not trying to force belief. You're becoming belief. And when you treat faith like a practice, something remarkable happens. Fear begins to lose its volume. It doesn't vanish, but it fades into the background. Fear becomes like static, a noise you can now ignore because you've tuned into a stronger frequency. That frequency is you. You aligned. You consistent. You living in congruence with the identity you chose, not the one that was handed to you. And just like brushing your teeth, just like training your body, just like learning a new skill, the more you walk the path, the less effort it takes. Eventually, it becomes natural. Eventually, it becomes automatic. That's the moment you realize. You don't just have faith. You are faith. It lives in your tone, in your choices, in your silence, in your stride. And it was built brick by brick, word by word, in the quiet consistency of your practice. This is the path. Walk it. Live it. Become it. Let me tell you something most people will never want to hear. But if you're ready for real transformation, you need to hear it. You are always being programmed. The only question is, by whom? If you are not deliberately feeding your mind with vision, with clarity, with truth, then something else, someone else is doing it for you, and the world. It is not neutral. The world is loud. The world is chaotic. The world is filled with suggestions that are small, fearful, conforming. Don't dream too big. Be realistic. Stay in your lane. Don't get your hopes up. Play it safe. And if you are not consciously rewriting your programming, those phrases become your default operating system. Not because they're true, but because they're repeated. And that's the real danger. Not that your beliefs are wrong, but that they were never yours to begin with. They were handed to you by parents who never chased their dreams, by teachers who settled, by friends who feared rejection, by systems that profit off your passivity. And if you don't pause and question where your beliefs came from, you'll spend your life defending limitations that never belong to you. This is what I call drifting. Drifting is when you stop steering your thoughts and you start reacting to everything around you. It's when your mind is no longer directed but driven by outside noise. And once that noise becomes normal, you enter what I call hypnotic rhythm, a spiritual autopilot that runs your life by default. You wake up and go through the motions. You stop questioning your beliefs. You silence your vision. You bury your desire under obligation. You replace possibility with survival. And the scariest part? You don't even know it's happening. Because the mind, when left alone, doesn't default to greatness, it defaults to repetition. And most of the world is repeating fear. So if you are not programming your mind with intention, you are being programmed by accident. And accidental programming never leads to purpose, never leads to power, never leads to the version of you that you know deep down you were meant to become. The shift begins the moment you say, no more autopilot, no more drift, no more borrowed beliefs. The moment you interrupt the noise and begin reprogramming from the inside out, that's when everything begins to change. The moment you truly see this, the moment you understand what's been happening inside your mind, you take your power back. You stop drifting. You stop absorbing. You begin choosing. Because here's what most people never realize. Your subconscious mind is a servant, not a master. It will follow any instruction it receives long enough. It doesn't argue. It doesn't resist. It obeys. So if the instructions it's running are filled with fear, filled with doubt, filled with limitation, then your life will reflect those commands. Not because they're true, but because they've been installed. But the moment you become conscious, the moment you say, I decide what gets repeated now, you begin rewriting the entire script. You start feeding your mind truth so repeatedly, so precisely, that the old beliefs no longer have a place to grow. You starve the doubt, you silence the noise, and you install something better. Not once, not when you feel like it, but every single day. That is your responsibility, not your parents', not your partners', not your mentors', yours. Because no one is coming to reprogram your mind for you. No one is going to crawl into your thoughts and replace your self-talk. No one can do that work except you, but the power to do it. You've always had it. The question is, are you using it? Are you programming with clarity and conviction, or are you letting the world speak louder than your purpose? Because the moment you make a decision to take control not just once, but daily, you create space for something new. You create space for freedom. And that freedom doesn't come because the fear disappears. It comes because the signal changes, because the code changes, because the identity changes. And when identity changes, everything changes. So speak with intention, interrupt the loop, install the truth. You don't need to fight the past, you just need to feed the future. One thought, one word, one repetition at a time. Let me ask you a question. One you've probably never considered until now. What future are your words planting today? Because every word you speak is a seed. And those seeds, they grow whether you meant them to or not. The subconscious doesn't wait for your permission. It doesn't differentiate between the words you say on purpose and the ones you say in passing. It doesn't sort through your sarcasm or your self-deprecation. It just listens. It records. It accepts. I'm so tired all the time. I'm not a people person. I'm just not built for success. This always happens to me. I could never do that. You might think you're venting. You might believe you're joking. You might assume it's harmless. But your subconscious doesn't hear context. It hears command. And when you repeat these commands often enough, your mind starts shaping your identity around them. Your actions start to match. Your results start to align. And suddenly, your life begins to reflect the story you didn't even know you were telling. That's the hidden cost of careless language. Not that it sounds negative, but that it becomes normal. It becomes familiar. And what is familiar becomes belief, and belief becomes behavior, and behavior becomes reality. You're not unlucky. You've just been undisciplined in your speech. You're not cursed. You've just rehearsed the wrong narrative for too long. But here's the good news. If language built the limitation, then language can build your liberation. It starts with small rewrites. I can't becomes I'm learning. I'm not becomes I'm becoming. This is hard becomes. This is training me. You catch yourself. You redirect. You speak differently. Until the new words don't just feel possible, they feel true. Because you've spoken them enough to install them. And once your mind accepts the new story, it stops resisting it. It starts becoming it. So speak with intention. Speak like a builder. Speak like someone whose words are laying the framework for a future worth living in. Because they are. Every sentence is a design. Every phrase is a blueprint. Every declaration is a decision. Your voice is not just describing life, it's creating it. So choose wisely, speak boldly, and repeat deliberately. You've been told that doubt is natural, that it's something everyone lives with, that it's a permanent shadow you must manage, tolerate, or cope with. But that's not true. Doubt is not natural. Doubt is programmed. It is installed, fed through subtle repetition, reinforced by fear, echoed by people who never broke free themselves. You weren't born with doubt. You didn't arrive in this world questioning your value. You didn't emerge hesitant, afraid to try, unsure of your voice. That came later. It came from experience, yes, but more than that, it came from repetition. You can't do that. That's not for people like us. You should be more realistic. And you heard it enough times spoken by teachers, parents, peers, media, that your subconscious absorbed it. Not because it was true, but because it was familiar. And now, if you're not careful, you'll keep repeating those same messages in your own voice until your life begins to mirror their fears. That's how doubt spreads. Not in explosions, but in whispers. It settles in through quiet repetition. It becomes your default response. You see opportunity and hesitate. You feel inspiration and second-guess it. You pull back before the breakthrough, not because you're weak, but because doubt has become your software. But here's the most empowering truth. If it was programmed in, it can be programmed out. Your mind is not made of stone. It is clay. And clay can be reshaped. The same method that created doubt, repetition, suggestion, emotion is the same method that will create confidence. But this time it won't be accidental. It will be intentional. You'll notice the phrases that no longer serve you. You'll catch the voice that doesn't belong. And when it speaks, you will respond not with shame, but with authority. You'll say, "That's not my truth." You'll say, "That's not my code anymore." You'll speak the belief you choose even when your voice shakes. Even when the words feel foreign, even when the mind resists, because repetition doesn't care how you feel. It only cares if you continue. And the moment you continue, you start to carve a new groove, a stronger groove, a chosen identity. You don't fight doubt, you override it, you replace it. You starve it of repetition and feed faith instead. That is how transformation happens. And it's already beginning. Everything you've ever believed, everything you've ever accepted as just who I am, was built by repetition. And everything you will become will be built the same way. Repetition is not weakness. Repetition is power. It's not mindless, it's mind-shaping. Look around you. The strongest structures in the world, the tallest buildings, the most stable bridges, the most unshakable foundations were not built by inspiration. They were built by pattern, by precision, by doing the same action in the same direction with the same tools over and over again. And your mind is no different. You will not become strong because you were inspired for 5 minutes. You will become strong because you chose the right message, and you repeated it when no one else believed, when no one else watched, when even you weren't sure it was working. Because repetition is how the subconscious learns. and the subconscious controls your behavior, and your behavior creates your outcomes. That is the system. It works every time. The only question is, are you using it on purpose or by accident? Because most people are repeating the wrong things. They're repeating their failures, their fears, their unworthiness. They relive rejection. They retell old wounds. They replay past disappointments, and they wonder why they still feel stuck. But the law of mind is not personal. It doesn't reward truth. It rewards repetition. Whatever is repeated becomes real, not because it's accurate, but because it's familiar. And what's familiar becomes belief. And belief becomes behavior. And behavior becomes your life. So if you want to change your results, change what your mind hears most. Speak with purpose. Repeat with emotion. Visualize with clarity. Declare with conviction. Not once. Not when you feel good, but every single day. Because that's how faith is built. That's how confidence is installed. That's how you shift from being a victim of your old programming to a master of your new creation. You don't need new gifts. You need a new groove. So lay the groove, repeat the truth, speak the vision, and keep going until the new pattern becomes the only one that feels like home. So here we are, at the edge of all your old beliefs, at the boundary between who you were taught to be and who you are now choosing to become. One truth remains: you will believe anything you repeat, and that makes you powerful beyond measure. Because it means your future is not dictated by your past. It is sculpted by your voice, by what you say when no one is listening, by what you declare when no one believes, by the identity you rehearse in silence until it becomes louder than fear, stronger than doubt, and deeper than every old script that once held you back. So speak like your future depends on it, because it does. Speak not to impress, but to instruct. Speak not to wish, but to wire. Let every word become a brick. Let every phrase become a path. Let every declaration become a map to the life you've been waiting to live. You don't need permission. You don't need perfect timing. You don't need to feel ready. You just need to begin repeating the version of you that already exists within. Because once the mind believes it, it begins to create it. And once belief is installed, reality follows. So make your choice. Will you repeat the lie? Or will you repeat the truth until it becomes your law? You are the programmer. You are the builder. You are the voice your subconscious is waiting to hear. So give it the message. Give it the vision. Give it the rhythm of your becoming. And watch how everything shifts. Because in the end, you will believe anything you repeat. So choose what you repeat, and you will have chosen your future.